Hello, Gareth.
Ladies and gentlemen, everybody. A very warm welcome to another session of Virtual Ops 2020. Today is the 10th session of our Virtual Ops 2020 season, and we are looking very much forward to a very lively discussion. My name is Daniel Stecher, IBS Software, Vice President Airline Operations, and it's a big honor for me to have you all with us. Before we start with the presentation, I suggest that we make a short introduction round that everybody in this call is getting to know who else is there contributing to this great session. So maybe Phil, you would like to start as head of the region.
Yes, hello, hi everyone. My name is Phil Hinton. I'm based in the UK. I've been with IBS for I think 16, 17 years. My background has always been in airline operations right from the early 90s when my first client was Cathay Pacific. And my responsibilities now are I'm responsible for the sale of all of our aviation products in Europe, Middle East, and also in Africa as well. So very pleased to meet you all.
De Gaffer, if you want to take over, please.
Okay, my name is De Gaffer. I'm from Ethiopian Airlines. I'm leading the project management office. So I'm working on different projects, especially for an airline systems.
Gareth, please. The stage is yours for the introduction.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gareth Clyde. I work for South African Airways. I've been in the aviation industry at South African Airways for the past 25 years. I'm currently heading up within our IT department, heading up our Airline Operations Solutions department. That covers our reservations, departure control, MRO, flight operations, including our enterprise data warehouse. So I oversee all of that on the IT side. And that's me.
Thank you. Hartmut.
Warm good morning and welcome from my side, of course, as well. And it's great to see that many familiar faces here on the show. My name is Hartmut, and I'm the responsible sales manager for Africa here at IBS.
Let's go to Kele Bogile. Short introduction.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is, you can call me Kele, so that it's easy to pronounce.
Hello, Kele.
I'm from Airport Company South Africa. I'm the Chief Technology Officer.
Pleased to meet you.
Thank you.
Candy. Candy, can you hear us?
Yes, hi. This is Candy from XYZ Consulting. We run an aviation consulting company for airlines and airports in Africa. Pleased to be on this call.
Martin.
Hello and a very good morning. Yeah, my name is Martin. I'm from Lufthansa Consulting, head of Ocean Group Flight Operations and Safety. And I'm in airline operations since 2002, so that's 18 years now, focusing mainly on the operations control, but also relatively recently on like airline mergers and acquisition from the operational point of view. And we were also recently doing the survey about state of the airline operations worldwide, and I'm sure that we will mention a few points out of there.
Christian.
You're on mute, Christian.
Thanks, Phil. Okay. My name is Christian Gessner. I'm also part of the Global Sales and Marketing Organization at IBS. I basically build the bridge between business and IT when it gets to cargo, having been 18 years in the industry. Yeah, that's about it.
Matthias. Matthias, can you hear us? Then we go to Paul.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Paul Pavlidis, working for IBS as an airline consultant. Have been in the aviation industry for 25 years now and been with IBS for just over 5 years. Glad to be on the call.
Now it's Sapna.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, Africa. My name is Sapna. I'm a product manager and consultant with IBS. have been here since 2005 and have been fortunate to work with several airlines across Europe, Middle East, Americas, and Asia Pacific. We'll bring in their views today and would like to understand how you all think and how you all are managing the crisis. Thank you.
So Vitor from Lisbon just joined in time. Vitor, you can introduce yourself, please. Vitor, can you hear us?
Good morning, everyone. Speaking from Portugal, Lisbon. Nice to hear. I arrived a little bit later, but I'm already there. Thank you.
You know, within 15 minutes, you are still on time in our industry.
Yes.
So now we are going to start the presentation and just some logistical information. So it's here an open dialogue. Everybody can speak up and raise questions. You can use the raise hand functionality of Teams. But our aim is to have really a lively dialogue amongst all participants. Of course, Sapna is going to go through her presentation, but at any time you can really raise a question and contribute, because we want to foster the dialogue within the industry. The session will be recorded, will be later on published on our event website. So the stage is yours, Sapna. I wish us all a very lively dialogue and enjoy.
Thank you, Daniel. And you can interrupt me at any time. You don't have to wait for me to finish anything. Just please go on and talk and ask questions at any point. And we have a lot of questions for you as well today. Let me share my screen. Here.
Yes, we can.
Great. So hello, I'm very happy to be talking to this panel today, because you bring in multiple centuries of experience in the African airline industry. And hence you would also have seen multiple airline crises and also would be now thinking opportunity than crisis. And that's what we exactly want today. We are talking about a market that has been identified as the highest growth market in the next 20 years, with a CAGR of approximately 4%, be it passenger or cargo, a need for more than 150% rise in pilots, approximately 19,000 in 2035. And that is the kind of market potential in this market that we are looking at in the 20 years hence. And today we stand at the rock bottom. And even pre-COVID, the last profit turn was around 2010 in the African airline industry. Load factors are around 72%, where the industry average is 83%. And then came COVID, and that's when everything went rock bottom, where the capacities fell to around minus 90%, and the RPKs and CTKs as well. And there was huge losses being informed by different airlines. We hear about South African who's restructuring completely and planning to come back to operate only with 1,000 workforce strength. We hear about Air Mauritius and Kenyan Airways cutting 50% of their workforce, and Comair asking for business rescue. South African Comair, for example, South African has been not operating since the early March period, and we might expect them to come back in January. So a lot of negative news coming in, but we understand more than managing the crisis, it's a lot of airlines are rebuilding themselves from the start of this stage. And so what we feel is that there is nowhere but upwards to go from here. So looking at the market potential that we talk about in 20 years and looking at the rock bottom that we have hit now, the journey is just positive and upwards.
Welcome to Esther, also from Kenya Airways. She just joined.
Thank you.
Jumbo Esther.
Jumbo, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Great to have you on board.
Thank you.
Right. On the note, so what we have been seeing is airlines managing or living by the day. They are reactionary, or they're living in a mode of speed trumping perfection. They are ensuring that their costs are controlled. They are responding very dynamically to the much fluctuating customer demand. At the same time, ensuring that they give the right messages to their customers and their staff so that they can keep operating, as well as responding to the very non-standard changes that are coming out from the global industry bodies like ICAO or IATA, responding quickly to travel restrictions coming across the globe, and at the same time ensuring that their resources are productive. So these seem to be the very reactionary operational priorities of airlines across the globe these days. But seeing that this crisis should also be an opportunity where the airlines should be resetting or re-engineering their external market, as well as looking inwards into their internal processes, re-engineering their business, IT strategies, project and people practices, because these would be the determinants of who survives and who is the fittest to survive in this world. And as it is true for all re-engineering and resetting practices, there would be best practices that come out and filters out from these transformations that are going on in these airlines. So transformations seem mandatory at this time, and from these mandatory transformations and re-engineers will come out best practices which will result in more resilient and disruption-proof airlines in the world. So that's our core message today. We discussed these three topics: how are airlines currently managing their priorities, and in the same time, which of the airlines are thinking intelligently and resetting their business processes and operations. So who are transforming and how are you transforming? But the most important topic would be to understand how you're using digital practices and technology to enable this transformation, because it is being talked about that digitization is something that would decide who the fittest would be at this age. And from these, which are the best practices that we recommend going on into the future? So those are the three topics we discussed today, and would love to hear from all of you in the process. So let's go to one of the priorities here, which is controlling costs and improving liquidity in the market. We see that the passenger demand is estimated to fall 54% in the African market in 2020. That's AFRA and IATA saying that. And in the RP case, we see, unlike other markets, we see from April it has been falling in Africa. If you also look at the absolute numbers of passengers traveled till July, even though the market has been saying rock bottom has been hit in April and everything is bouncing back, we see a slight bounce back in May, but then again, it's going down and getting even worse in June and July. And as a consequence, there is estimated revenue loss of 8.56 billion estimated in 2020. Q3 is supposed to be a start of recovery, and Q4 it's going to look better. What are airlines doing now? How are they meeting their operational priorities now? Of course, the flight schedules are falling, as you see in the OAG stats over here. Interestingly, you would think that this is the curve that's happening in all the regions, but Africa is kind of breaking the norm, I guess, with April being at -61% and a fall ever since being seen, even till the early parts of August, and a little hope coming back around the previous weeks of August. So around 58% of flight schedules have fallen, and the capacity in ASKs also having fallen. And these are absolute numbers. That's why you would see a proportional count over here across the airlines based on their volume of operations. But interestingly, you'd see, other than some like the Ethiopians, June has been a worse fall than the Aprils and Mays. And looking at the inherent conditions of this market, we all know that even though internationally Europe is your biggest market, 40% of your international market is Europe, followed by intra-Africa, that is 27%, which could be the reason why you see one of the biggest falls in passenger demand and in the revenues as well. Your intra-Africa market, as always has been said, is underserved and there is very low frequency there. And it's interesting to see that even in intra-Africa, if you look at the top 20 airlines, 50% is occupied by foreign airlines and not indigenous African airlines. If you look at the frequency of operations, only it's less than 50% that your 400 rich international routes are being served now. Only 19 states seem to have, only 4 states seem to have around 3 international airlines, whereas 19 states don't have international airlines at all. And 68 out of these 56 400 routes are only served by 2 daily flights. So look at the frequency and how the market is underserved. So let me come in here with a few questions. Do you think that COVID would accelerate some of the liberalization of intra-African market? Because there seems to be very high restrictions between markets. Which, you see here it's at minus 27% that the flight frequencies are operating in Africa. So would SATM and other initiatives be accelerated during COVID? We would like to hear that from you. Do you think there would be improved intra-market operations due to these liberalizations? What do you think, Degafe? Do you think SATM would be accelerated at this stage? We also have other questions for you to understand. So we are happy for you to type in your responses in what you feel about these information in the Teams message chats as well. If you do not want to express it vocally, we are happy for that. But if you have any views about this, we are happy to hear. For example, we know it is one of the highest growth potential markets. So would more partnerships or more consolidations be forged in this market due to COVID? And we also see that LCCs like Kululu and Fly Africa are stepping up into the tier 2 markets. Will this trend continue and will this trend improve in the market is something we'd like to hear from. Any views over here?
Paul, what's your perspective on this? You are since many years in that region. What are you feeling will be the outcome of this crisis? Will this be fostering liberalization, or will the market stay as it is at the moment?
Daniel, my view is that nothing can stay as it is at the moment. I mean, I think COVID has been a leveler in many ways. It was said earlier that the South African market, for the months of, I'm talking South Africa here now, but for the months of certainly May and June, April, May and June, there were no flights. So airlines have really been challenged, and I don't think the status quo will remain. So will we see some partnerships forged? I think absolutely. I think that's a given. I think what we're seeing is everybody battling to survive, and I think they'll be looking to each other to help each other. So I think in some way partnerships will be forged, and I think the liberalization will also will come to the fore, and I think in some way be accelerated. That's my view, and I think we'll see a lot from LCCs continuing to step up, as airlines need to keep their cost bases down. I think you're going to see more LCCs, hybrids, stepping into the regional space in Africa, which was maybe traditionally up until now more seen as, full cost carrier potential. So I definitely think we will see change.
And Martin, with your perspective from I think also a very strong focus on Africa, and also your claim for a new mindset. What do you think will be the future of the African continent and the aviation in general?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it cannot stay how it is. Something has to change. However, I'm a little bit pessimistic if we look at the comparison of the South American market, which is a little bit ahead of Africa. And even there, the consolidation, yes, it happened somehow through LATAM, Avianca, and so on. But it happened in a very fragmented way. So setting up all those local AOCs, and now actually all three major players being bankrupt. And I'm afraid that in Africa at the moment, there is not really a driving force, although the companies like Kenya, potentially renewed South African or Ethiopian have the potential to expand. But my only hope is that the politicians will now understand how serious the situation is and stop playing the political card and really allow on the legal side this to happen, because without that, there is no way for consolidation.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So let's look at some interesting stats and questions on one of the major topics that's discussed, cargo capacity and domestic. So we've seen Ethiopians saying that cargo has been their savior, and they see that around 26% of revenue in the African market would be contributed by cargo in 2020, which is up from the 12% that's usual. Even if the air freight cost has gone up 40 to 50% higher than the 2019 levels. Despite of that, cargo capacity has fallen minus 26% around. So we see that it's because of a huge fall during the May and June periods compared to 2019 Y-on-Y that we see over here. Interesting information on the domestic market as well, because what we've seen from markets like Asia Pacific and North America is domestic travel has been 20 or 25% better than international, whereas in Africa we see it's just 9 percentage points better than international. So one question we have over here, I would like to know your views over here, is how much of your passenger aircrafts were repurposed? We know that with Ethiopian around 25 were repurposed. And what were the challenges that you faced in repurposing your aircrafts to cargo?
Christian, maybe that's also an opportunity for you to give a little bit your perspective on what is maybe special on the cargo in Africa compared maybe to other regions in the world. Christian, can you hear us?
Again, team chat. Another perspective I'd like to bring over here is we've seen that in the African market, but this is a global value rather, the twin aisles due to their have been non-utilized or utilized lesser than the single and the regional aircrafts, around 75.1% less utilization in July. And in the African markets, Africa is also unique in this aircraft age perspective. Approximately 14 years is what we see in 2020, 25, and 2030, showing an aged aircraft fleet in Africa compared to other markets. So do you think that we see that leisure market in the last 1 or 2 weeks has been opening up in Africa? Domestic demand is slightly better than international. Would this be a
Sorry, I was on toilet. Have to apologize.
Would this be a permanent kind of shift to narrow bodies? Would this mean that the wide bodies would be utilized much less than they used to be, because we see a lot of wide bodies going out of action, especially in Africa? Would this also mean a right and efficient aircraft assignments coming on or being accelerated due to COVID, and a fleet modernization coming in? So that's something I would like to hear from you. Is this a better shift to the right aircraft for the right routes kind of strategy, and hence a movement to the narrow bodies away from the wide bodies? That's also something we'd like to hear from you, because that's a trend we are seeing. Is there any views you'd like to express there? And we also like to understand another trend we were seeing is AFRA, for example, introducing some capacity sharing portals. So it seems as if, like SATM, there would be higher capacity sharing and resource sharing between airlines to bring down costs and improve liquidity in the market. So the resource sharing and leasing models are coming up in the industry. When we talked to Asia Pacific and Europe, we understood this could be a rising model, and aircrafts and crew could be coming out of a leased contractual source. So that is very interesting to find out. Even though 2/3 of the market seem to be fully or partially state-owned, there seems to be lack of state stimulus or relief being obtained by African airlines. So there's a significant burden for them to control costs and increase liquidity by their own. As you see, there's a lot of groundings, there's a lot of transfer of aircrafts, there's a lot of retirement of fleets that you see, but along with that, on the wet side, you see a lot of job losses. So African Airlines has traditionally been a contributor of 6.2 million jobs and 2.6% contribution to African GDP. But IATA says that there will be a 3.5 million, that's around more than 50% job losses in the aviation sector. And that means a contribution of minus 35 billion to the overall GDP of Africa. The only silver lining here seems to be that jet fuel remains at minus 42.8% in the ME and Africa region at around 46 per barrel. So that is the only silver lining that we have been seeing into the cost front. Well, most interesting topic that we would like to spend more time on. Martin, I've borrowed your Lufthansa Consulting bit here, which I found very interesting. Even pre-COVID, we were finding that only around 40% of state-of-the-art systems were available in the airline operations space, and more than 60% of systems there were either outdated, legacy, or not found suitable for future purposes. However, FTE and other organizations and IATA had done some interesting surveys, and what was coming out of it was around 900 plus airline and aviation professionals were saying that there is higher chance that digitization will be improved or accelerated by COVID. More than 60% felt that way. When we talked to airlines and understood what were some of the technology contributions or how they're using technology, they were using flexible technology to help them restructure their fleets, networks, and crew, and that being reflected in their airline operation systems. There were a lot of cessations of or suspensions of operations and Comairs talking about their S129 retrenchments, etc., resulting in a lot of resources being cut. Repurposing of cargo was also being supported by technology a lot. Because there was restructuring of fleets and wide bodies going off, some fleets being used more, reskilling of crew was important to catch up with the new fleet type. So there was a lot of retrainings going on. On the IT side, there was interest in moving to higher cloud-based infrastructure because the pinches of being on-premise was being felt at these stages. Early benefit project delivery seen within airlines, 6 monthly or lesser timeframes of agile form of project implementations. A lot of airlines we were talking to were re-looking at their processes and trying to make them leaner and taking away wastages from their business processes, looking more into interdepartment processes and how they can break down the silos over there, and seeing wastages in their IT infrastructure, reprioritizing their IT infrastructure, and getting into contract negotiations a lot. It's more value-based contract these days. And of course, there's been more continuous monitoring of costs and efficiency of the resources they have, the limited resources they have at hand. So these were some of the areas in which high utilization of technology was seen, but we would like to hear from you as well if there's more areas that you have been seeing technology usage in and digitization to help this transformation. So these are some of the views we'd like to understand from you. Do you see COVID as accelerating digitization as these 900 plus respondents thought? And do you see this as an opportunity? Because right now you can take away your focus and focus internally to look at your processes and how your landscapes are. Do you see yourself looking internally more? I know that Kenyan and Ethiopian in our conversations were really looking hard at their business processes, what were their pains, and trying to cut out wastages. Do you think that's accelerating everywhere? What's your view there?
Yes, actually, the cafe is speaking. According to Japan Airlines, yes, we agree with this.
Thank you.
And Martin, in your presentation beginning of June, you were already claiming for the new mindset, and you will be our guest speaker 24th of June. So again, several weeks went through. Have you seen somewhere in the industry that the new mindset and changes are finally settling here and there? Or are you still claiming it with a maybe louder voice for the entire world?
I would say I'm still claiming it with a louder voice. The traces of a new mindset are emerging, but at the moment the people are of course still too limited by their companies in what can be done and what the future holds for. But it's good that more and more people are really talking about the need of some digital development. And having said that, I was actually looking into the results of African market this morning. So good that you put the chart there, Sapna, because maybe we can discuss about it a little bit as well. I mean, we had only like 5 airlines participating from Africa, and unfortunately neither Ethiopian nor Kenya participated, so maybe next time. But what is interesting is that more or less the results for majority of the survey were very similar, as I mentioned already before, but there are 3 areas which were quite different to the rest of the world. And one of them is this chart, where actually for the operations control and the crew control, the airlines were claiming that something between 75 and 100% of the IT is outdated and insufficient. So there seems to be a huge gap, and also leading to it, if you remember when we were talking about the integrated planning and who is involved in the operations control and so on, all those areas seem to me, based on the results, very limited. For example, in the operations planning, I have it somewhere in front of me, it was like that rarely even the OCC is part of the operations planning process, that it's really planned separately and then handed over to the OCC. And then within the OCC, it was interesting that, for example, the maintenance or the passenger control plays a very minor role when compared with the other regions. So it would be interesting to hear from the colleagues if you can somehow identify with this, and what is the core reason for this from your perspective. Is it just the investment, or is it how you are using the data? Like what would be the next step you would need to make towards the digitalization? Or, of course, is it the people? And there I come back to Daniel, where actually in the question, what is the biggest challenge with the digitalization? There, the human factor was the number 1 challenge, human factor / training.
Yeah, but speaking on the human factor, because I think that's now maybe exactly the predicament in the situation. On one hand, we saw in an earlier slide a lot of job losses. And then on the other hand, now the requirement of a new mindset. So many people might be feared to maybe formulate claims like this because if managers want to keep status quo and not changing something, and suddenly somebody is claiming a new mindset, maybe he is threatened to be out of the company. So is this maybe the predicament we have in the industry?
I personally don't think it's a threat. We're feeling threatened. I think if I look at some of our other clients in the region, so not just in Africa, but in Europe and Middle East as well, I think there's a number of phases that have gone through. The first one was just to suspend projects while everyone was trying to deal with the immediate emergency. Then there is the sort of the staff realignment activities that have been going on now. But I sort of get a sense as our customers are talking to us that they want to restart these projects. They definitely want to not just restart them where they left off. They've taken this opportunity. And I think the whole world has had an opportunity just that you can do things very differently, a lot quicker, a real sort of challenge of what the normal is. And they're really looking to restart the projects with that different mindset that you say, Daniel. I think it's not a fear factor that they're being pushed. I think it's a sort of a general openness that everyone has that, you know, things will be different. And in a way, here's a good opportunity to rethink through some of these processes that they currently have. And the way is the way we've always done it. Is that always the correct way? And certainly, you know, across the board, not just in airline operations, but a number of our projects, this is definitely the feedback that we're getting from customers.
I have from a cargo perspective, I've got perhaps a bit of slightly other view. If you look at the cargo industry, or especially what airlines are doing, and I mean, IATA has been struggling in the past years actually to drive digitization in that area. I mean, if you look at cargo, it's paper-based, and I assume that it is also in Africa. And a lot of paper-based processes, when it gets to the acceptance, the handling, special cargo, whatever, you need to manage a lot of documentation. And this is, of course, leads to that you need a certain amount of resources, which is staff, of course, specialists who are handling the documents, who are work on this. And having been in the industry, driving such initiatives, and now having worked the last years actually for IT companies who basically can drive digital transformation into carriers, the technology is there. And we need to be honest, we need to face it actually. By implementing or replacing these paper-based processes with new technology and new ways of working, of course there needs to be a layoff of staff. But that was perhaps, for cargo, I can speak, a bit of the weakness actually, that a lot of staff was needed, related to a lot of cost, and with the new technology, this has become obsolete. And having driven such initiatives in certain markets, that was always the problem. It was not about technology or implementing technology, it was about actually change management. And we saw a lot of reluctancy with the people we were talking to, especially because they knew that it would come and it would mean for them that they would be replaced by technology in their roles. So I think this is something where at the moment carriers need to really look at, especially after the crisis or going out of the crisis, implement technology, and it will lead to layoffs of staff.
Thank you. So let's go to another priority now, which is we were talking about cost control, but another important priority and something I would like to hear from you more on is how are you responding to unpredictable customer demand bubbles, as well as unpredictability about the recovery of demand. ICAO theories come out talking about different ways of return. The more heard ones nowadays are the W-shaped paths because of the second waves coming up. Even though we thought it's going to be local, there seems to be, especially in Africa, going down seen again in the July-August phases, even though it came up a little back in May. And the determinants of that, of course, is how soon the economy and trade will revive, how is consumer purchasing power going to revive, and what's the unified message that government and airline bodies and airlines are going to give to their customers about safety, how soon is a mass vaccine going to be available, and how soon are the travel restrictions and quarantines going to be lifted across regions. On this perspective, the AFRA, IATA, and different airlines we were talking about think that revival would be possible in the 2023 and 24 phases. So What do you think? If you think it's going to come back early, you can use the team chat to put in some of your inputs, or we'd like to hear from you as well. Do you think it's going to be W-shaped or it's going to be a slow L-shaped? And is 2023 and 24 looking at like a possibility in Africa to come back to the 2019 levels? I can give you some more inputs there, which we have found. So the unpredictability is also supported by the organizations like IMF, which keeps bringing down its predicted GDP growth percentages. So in 2020, in the globe, it was minus 3% earlier, and they recalculated that as minus 4.9%, and even the 2021 estimates were brought down. If you look at, for example, South Africa compared to other regions, it is keeping aside United Kingdom, of course, it's falling around 7% fall expected, and some of the silver linings come out of the East African markets. So this was the GDP estimate growth before Corona. This was a baseline or the a kind of realistic or optimistic kind of view, and the most recent one, the last bar you see, is the latest estimate of how the GDP is going to look like. So from the 2.4% range in 2019, it seems as if it will be between minus 2.1% to minus 5.1% in 2020 in Africa, and it might be the region's first recession in 25 years. Pointing to that, we are seeing that if you look at the customer confidence side and the purchasing capacity side, on the confidence side, in IATA surveys, we have been seeing that business confidence has been bouncing back faster, but consumer confidence has been bouncing back very much slower, and they are making last-moment bookings. For instance, in PAX surveys done, it seems as if more than 50% of consumers will wait for at least 6 months till the pandemic subsides. To them, that means a mass production of vaccines, and they do not believe that the airline safety communications would improve the trust or confidence much. But I'd like to hear about that from you, that view from you. So it's going to be vaccine production, seems like. And there is also an analysis that we see about how much the customer purchasing capacity has been changing. So when you look at Nigeria and South Africa over here compared to United States, around 60% of the market feels that they have been impacted income-wise and job-wise because of Corona, and hence they are cutting down their purses of spending by 70% and around 65% cut down in the investments they make. So when they say they cut down their expenses, travel is one of the highest priority that goes to be cut down, and hence it's obvious that the purchasing capacity for travel in Africa is coming down. Business confidence is bouncing back, but the need for business doesn't seem to be bouncing back because of the data we saw earlier about the economy revival not being so great. So, and also because of replacements like the virtual conferences we are doing now being good enough to replace business travel. That's why even if there's confidence bouncing back, travel is not bouncing back on the business side. It's still determined by leisure and domestic and consumer markets a lot. Coming to our interesting side of how technology is being used over here. There is, so we have been talking to different regions in Asia Pacific, and we're talking to some of our friends in Africa as well a few weeks back who were saying that their planning cycles have gone down from, say, 6 months to maybe even 1 month. Their roster and pairing plannings is going down to a weekly kind of cycle. They're living by the day. So it's kind of dynamically replanning, looking at customer demand. They are hoping and using technology to link demand with operations higher. So operations should reflect or respond very quickly to demand and predictions in demand in the future. technology should flexibly change to changing operational volumes, ramp ups and ramp downs of operational volumes that's happening these days. The integration between departments is somewhere that technology is being highly used. So customers or prospects we talk to are talking a lot about how interfaces to external systems and external departments can be improved to bring in that dynamicity. And a very interesting thing, I've used Astute Aviation's chart over here, but we also have been seeing that while replanning is being dynamic, it's also being a continuous improvement process. For example, a manpower plan or a schedule plan, looking at further steps ahead in the airline operations processes, taking feedback loops from them, taking human inputs as well as data being collected from these feedback loops to continuously improve the business processes. So an a manpower plan looking further into pairing and rostering, or a tracking phase to look at how it can be improved dynamically, or a schedule plan looking at a tail assignment phase to see how it can be improved. So everything is taking feedbacks from further stages. And that's something that's many airlines are looking at this period. And disruption recovery tools that seem to have been prioritized less over qualitative decisions has been looked at more at this phase. So we are getting more queries on how decision support and better disruption recovery tools can be made available for faster decision making at this phase. Is that what you also think? And we'd also like to hear more about from you about interdepartment communication improvements. Do you think operational planning is going to be more dynamic in the future as well? We know it is now, but does that mean your plans would be shorter in the future? Is that a future trend, or is it going to stop with the COVID phase? And do you think that COVID will accelerate adoption of recovery technology and tools and decision support tools more? I would like to hear from you over here.
Maybe may I forward this question to our newbies from Air Botswana and Kenya Airways, and or as we have an airport operator in the room, maybe some insights or views from AXA on these questions.
I mean, I can just sort of add a little bit from some of our other customers in Europe just on some of these topics, just to show what is going on there. So certainly the shorter planning timeframes, they believe is the need to be more agile in the future is going to remain, certainly for the next sort of 2 or 3 years. So it's as you're getting sort of these travel corridors in Europe, what we're seeing is that they're suddenly getting closed down. So that requires us to be sort of a lot more sort of agile and flexible in the way that happens. How that then impacts into other areas along that whole sort of planning cycle, particularly crew members. Maybe that was a particular flight that they were going to be going on, which had a requalification. So what happens with the training management of crews? I think there's just this whole acceptance that we can't just have a 6-month seasonal plan and then sort of like 2 monthly or monthly crewing plans that just then go into this cycle, that at any time that can be broken, and it's a question of how quickly you can react to it. So I personally think that because the technology is there and people get used to being more agile, they'll understand that some of the business benefits that will come out of it in the long run. So the need to be agile might not necessarily be driven by COVID. It could be driven by other factors, economic factors that allows them to be much more dynamic. So I think we're definitely going to see this. That's certainly the view that we're getting in other parts.
Yeah, I totally agree. We are also hearing from many airlines all over the world that it doesn't make sense to publish a monthly roster if you can expect already next week having plenty of changes, and especially with the limitations of many IT systems, then the additional new changes cannot be digested in time. So more and more airlines are shortening the roster period and try to cope also with all the new regulations which are sometimes coming on a weekly basis. And that will be then the question, will it be necessary also to create a next season, or will it be the so-called operations period, which is sometimes 3 days, sometimes 10 days? Will it be not the day of ops anymore, but will it be the week of ops? And the Ops Control Center will have more responsibility also in the future to create maybe the schedule for the upcoming weeks. So that will be interesting to see in the future.
Daniel, it's Kele. I think I agree with Philip in terms of the need to be more agile. I mean, with us as an airports company, in terms of even managing slots, I mean, you can imagine how difficult it is. In some instances, some of our airlines locally, might not even come back. So it's quite important that we manage things as we go and really look at the environment within which we operate and adjust accordingly. And I think that's gonna be the order of the day for quite some time.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. Even for us in Kenya, we used to make monthly rosters. It's not even happening as much anymore. So basically, we are back to maybe 2 weeks because some airports are not yet open. There are changes every day. So for us to just be able to manage the changes, we are doing this in short term as opposed to long-term planning. Definitely, there'll be a lot of interdepartmental communication that is required because of the short-term plannings. And with a lot of cargo flights now coming in that are ad hoc, so a lot of the planning has to be short-term in order to manage this. Yeah.
And Esther, maybe you can share who was driving this. Was this driven by the airline who was kind of feeling this requirement, and then you went to the union to agree on this, or was it the other way around? The union wanted to have a change and was then approaching the crew planning for the change, or was it done from both sides in parallel?
So a lot of this stuff is done from both sides because the agreements that were initially put in place prior to the COVID issue. So if we have to go against anything against the agreement, then we have to involve the union. I mean, yeah. So all this is in agreement with the union.
And the union is also agreeing now on more relaxed flight time limitations and more flexibility for the day of ops, or they are still having the stance, no, the rules are the rules and we are not changing them?
It just depends on what's going on. So if other dynamics are okay, then they agree to everything. If they want to push in something, they tighten the noose. It's a give and take.
Yeah, I think that's also what we are hearing now more and more globally, that airlines are now finding a new collaboration, maybe collaboration 2.0, or which number you would like to put on it, and in order to avoid a quarantine, extending the flight times in order to have really a turnaround of 2 legs, where in the past you had to have a stopover, layover, and then getting back from this country, the crew members would be out of the roster for maybe 2 weeks. And just in order to tackle this, the unions are now more cooperative and also agreeing on these exceptions.
Great. That was a good discussion, and I hope we have that in the further slides as well. Thank you. Moving on to the next priority, that is ensuring safe operations and communicating safe operations for improving customer and staff trust. There are 2 aspects that we are covering over here. The one is that because of the unpredictable phases in which peaks and troughs of corona has been happening across the African market, and because of multiple waves coming back, There has been a lot of variant phases of ad hoc quarantines, travel restrictions, border closures, and different screening measures applied for different countries inside. So airlines have told us they were struggling to respond rapidly to all these changes, and they were hoping for a standard guideline of safety processes. And that's when recently ICAO had come out with the CART regulations, and it seems as if from the government to AFRA to everybody is suggesting that harmonized adoption of CART across the African market would be critical for takeoff or a revival. Rwanda Airlines has been mentioned as one of the earliest ones to adopt these regulations. And on the other hand, the part 2 of this would be how airlines are communicating safety bulletins and giving confidence to their customers and staff to go back to the air. So safety now seems to be a differentiator, not only in Africa, but across the globe. Recently from some surveys, because of the second waves that are coming in, customer confidence, proportionality to the safety communications seem to have gone down. But how do you think? Do you think safety communications are improving customer confidence in Africa, or would that be vaccines or pandemic subsiding that would decide that more?
Sapna, interesting you mentioned that safety and the communications being a differentiator. I more think it's a kind of hygiene factor. If you're not communicating the safety, if you're not making your customers feel safe, they're not going to travel, right? So, I think that there's a lot of pent-up demand that's been building, particularly with lockdowns in specific countries where customers have been unable to see their families, have been unable to travel. So that pent-up demand has driven this need for travel, and people also wanting to seek experiences. Lockdown forces you to think quite differently, when you're contained within the walls of your house, and suddenly you realize what freedom means to you. So what I'm saying is that the requirement for travel, is there. Safety is a non-negotiable, and I think almost there was a lot of focus on communication, a lot of information still going out, around safety. So almost we're coming off that from being a differentiator to being just expected. And if it's not there, you're just not going to travel. So, that's my view on that.
Okay. Yeah. Safety communications seem to be still important from the airline perspective, because that combined with a vaccine probably is the right solution for bringing back people to the skies. Coming to the technology side of things, airlines have been using technology for contactless pre-flight, in-flight, and post-flight safety measures, and because of that, there has been, impact on the check-in cycles of crew members or passengers, as well as turnaround windows impacts. And they have been using technology to dynamically manage that. More self-service processes coming out for crew as well as passengers, like check-in and briefing. Here is where there's the highest priority that's coming out for a multi-consideration rule or powerful rule engine, which considers on one side the FTA limitations that we were talking about earlier, which changes, for example, when you are repurposing to a cargo, or operating with lesser number of passengers, more load-dependent crewing coming in there, and rules need to consider that. There's also the fatigue impacts when crew are repurposed, for example, at Ethiopian to the cargo operations. And in the meantime, also consider the travel restrictions that have to be followed and the immigration considerations that have to be followed. So a very powerful rule engine is being called for. There's also a need for higher communications to airports, immigration departments, and H&S teams. So requests for that has also been higher. Another important trend coming up is e-skilling of staff, and so that they are distanced in their training facilities. So distancing and training facilities and reaching out more with e-training options and e-skilling options to retain the skills of people have been important over here. So that's another area that's we are seeing growing in the use of technology. In the short term, things like contact tracing apps and crew quarantine and travel history tracking apps are finding high importance. And there's been a very high need of auditing of operational conformance, how well they are sticking to regulations that need to be followed in these times. This is how technology is being used. And the question to you is, do you see e-training applications coming up very high at these times and going on into the future from here? Is e-reskilling something that you're looking at and catching on in the future? And how are you managing crew trainings and recurrent checks, ensuring social distancing at these times?
Actually, from Japan Airlines side, almost all our training will be already changed to e-training. This is applicable for crews, even for technician, and for different marketing trainings. So now Japan Airlines Aviation Academy is already converted to e-training. So now every training is done electronically or via Microsoft Teams or any other options.
Great. So is all trainings possible that way, or do you still have to plan for your, your recency checks, like ensuring that crew take off and land X number of times in a period? Do you still have to do that physically, or is there any alternative that you have found out to maintain crew recencies?
Yeah, you are right. Actually, regarding those parts, we are still working in that require physical training. So that's why, rather than that, we are doing that.
Thank you.
Sapna, can you clip the cable of your headphone? Because it makes some scratches with the microphone.
I have, and I just realized I've lost my clip on it. Sorry, Daniel. The last priority that we are talking about is resource productivity. So we know airlines the aircraft utilization is down by around 60%, and we hear about Air Mauritius and other airlines cutting their staff by 50%. South Africa coming up with 1,000 workforce kind of operations. So there seems to be limited resources. There seems to be unpredictable ramp ups and downs of available operations, and aircrafts only utilize around 60%. So productivity is definitely a challenge because all these limited operations have to be aligned to meet the current unpredictable demands. When we talk to airlines, the main challenges they were facing here is, of course, the unpredictable operation volume changes, ensuring social distancing and quarantines, yet ensuring the productivity. Reskilling of employees and retaining their skills, because in some cases there are large gaps in inactivity of crew members or staff. And interestingly, we all know there is a flexi shift and a remote operation kind of mode that's coming up even in the planning world and in the OCC world. So there are technical challenges and technical security risks that are being reported because of that. How can we make employees work collaboratively during this time? They're so used to qualitatively being together in the OCC center, talking and discussing solutions. They're also considering the security and cyber risks of making systems available remotely to people. So how can my airline operations software be accessed with high performance from the homes of these people who are working remotely? So remote operations is something we'd like to understand from you on. Do you think that's going to be a future trend? Do you see planning or OCC departments moving more remote, or does that mean an OCC does not have to be limited to a certain geographical locations? Could you have somebody from Germany managing airlines OCC in Africa? And what challenges do you see there? Do you see? We'd like to hear about remote operations from you.
Like from my perspective, there is a definitely chance to go a little bit remote. However, the precondition is that it will be a little bit more split into the, let's say, production and the decision making. And I think the decision making you cannot really make remote, because you need the people to talk and work together. But for the production, like the crew planning, crew control, flight planning, I think those are the areas where I can imagine, thanks to the technologies, that those people can be sitting actually somewhere completely outside of the OCC, outside of the airport. And technically, why not be sitting also at home? I mean, we saw it with some US carriers where it's quite usual that the call centers are done on the part-time basis from the homes of the people, and there's not much difference to this.
I certainly agree as well that the core processes are going to be still within the OCC, but don't you think, Martin, that maybe there are some smaller processes that with technology, particularly mobile technology, that maybe some decision-making, not key decision-making, but some key decision-making could be decentralized because people would have access to data, which maybe in the past they haven't with some legacy systems?
Not super convinced about that, because in my opinion, the more data we have, the more complex the decision-making it is and like holistic. So right. It's going against each other from my perspective, and we might get there, but first I guess we have to go through the wave where we learn how to work with that, and for that I feel we'll need the people to be together.
Okay, interesting.
Interesting point, because if you look at the frequency of data analytics support for OCCs and plannings that's coming into us these days in our proposal requests, we definitely are seeing a higher proportion of need of analytics that's coming in. And could that be, I was wondering, because of people going more remote, unable to do more qualitative analysis? So I was wondering to check with you and everybody, is that why the need for interdepartment data and analytics and database predictions going higher in this COVID period? So I brought up this technology uses over here. Technology is highest being used in areas like skill retention and waiving expiries to, as we heard earlier, reskilling or ensuring crew are skilled to come back, and even staff are skilled to come back after a break. Efficient remote operations, so higher availability, higher performance systems available to be operated remotely. We're also seeing requests on or a trend of crew and employees being multi-skilled. I mean, an OCC person being a data scientist as well, maybe, or a crew being able to operate more number of aircrafts, being trained to operate more number of aircrafts, a kind of pool or a multi-skilled pool of crew members. Definitely because of remote operations, need for cyber security and privacy has gone up. In the Europe side especially, we are hearing that there needs to be managing of rosters and vacations and hours based on the flexi work options that crew are given. So it has to be a proration happening. And most interesting thing I would like to discuss is analytics, which came up earlier between Martin and Phil. Do you think that's going to come up higher because people are sitting back at home? They need more inputs to make decisions, and decisions are being more evaluated these days. We have talked agile many times before, but some of our partner airlines are accelerating their agile workforce transformation. Their workforce is being made smaller, 6 to 7 team members. They're working intra-department, crossing departments, cross-functional teams. And it seems, for example, KLM has told us that there has been a 20 to 25% improvement in productivity of their staff because this was introduced. So that's another area I'd like to hear. But mainly analytics and predictions, what do you think? Is that a upper trend? Would also like to understand what you're doing to retain skills during these high inactivity periods for your staff. And do you see a cross-skilled resource pool coming up? I'm especially interested in, do you think crew would be more cross-skilled in the future? Would they be trained in operating more number of aircrafts? Is that a trend that will be catching on higher because of COVID? So I've actually, we have looked at all the priorities, and mainly we have discussed about what type of technology and digitization usage is happening in these areas. This is just a summary of what we have discussed, just in case you have more views there. So on cost control side, higher monitoring, more agile-based projects, and more value-based purchases, more cost optimizations. On the response side, to respond faster, tools that help in flexible replanning, and feedback loops from further processes in the operations process. More distant support, and interestingly, we are also seeing re-optimization needs coming in the recovery phase. So planning was typically told as the optimizer phase, but we are asking for a re-optimization in the recovery phase as well, probably because of the huge number of changes that are happening in the recovery phase. Then higher need for communication tools to crew members, to hotels, transport departments, more dynamic slot changes these days. So that's what you see as the need for tools in the fast response side. On operational safety side, very powerful rule engines and flexibility to travel restriction changes, higher self-service apps coming up, and higher need for configurability and alerting has been coming up. Productivity side, data was coming up as the highest request, need for more data to support productivity, utilization monitors, and predictions. Flexi reporting was coming up, need for pulling out different types of reports from the data. So flexibility and dynamicity in report generations were higher, maybe due to higher auditing needs, and checking contact tracing, etc. Need for higher performance and available systems. And another trend coming up was the remote IT implementation that has been checked with IT partners like us. So need to be on the customer side is of course not an easy possibility these days. So how efficient is the automated remote implementation pipeline of IT vendors? Is this your transformation story as well, or is it different? Are you doing or using technology in any other ways? I know we have talked about this during the course, but is there anything else you would like to add to how technology can help these transformations? Haley, on the airport IT transformation side, what's the major changes that you think getting adopted? Because that's one area where transformation has been highest for in the aviation space. Do you see anything more interesting happening in the airport side, airport IT side?
Yes. So there's a couple of things that we're looking at. Obviously, the biggest thing now is touchless technology. Where you can make it easy for your passengers to travel through the airports without touching things and observing the rules around social distancing. So, for instance, before COVID, we were embarking on the whole passenger self-service journey, and we wanted to make some investments there. But obviously, looking at how things have turned out from a COVID perspective and income perspective, etc., we thought, the whole thing of having your passenger self-service as dictated by IATA in the past would probably have to change completely going forward. Things like robotics needs to be taken into consideration. Simple things like mobile applications. We need to start to look at how we can strategically refocus them to accommodate everything. But I think going forward, mobile will be big. Touchless technology along the lines of passenger self-service will be one of the critical things that we're going to be looking at.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Considering we have 15 minutes more, there's another slide or another set of information I would like to spend more time on. That is, how is these digital transformations and best operational transformations going to filter into the future? So, as we mentioned earlier, Michael Hammer's re-engineering principle is that when there's a jolt, all the changes or the transformations that are triggered by this jolt would result in a good set of best practices being filtered that sustain into the future to improve efficiency of operations. And that's so true in the airline and airports world as well. This is some of the things that were coming out of that, what would sustain from all that we discussed into the future. And these are some of our recommendations as well, but happy to hear more from you. On the business processes side, we had already touched upon seamless inter-department integrated processes. So walls have to come down between departments, and communications have to be inter-department, and process flow should not be bounded by department walls. It's not an easy task, but that will be triggered by COVID is what hearsay comes to, especially when people are working remotely. The need for technology pushing between departments is getting higher. So standards of interface communications are also coming up, rather than each airline having their own modes of communicating to a passenger reservation system or a HR system. More standards will be coming in. Continuous improvement processes or integrated planning and tracking is also important. So looking into the future, bringing in feedback loops into and continuously improving each of the processes is also something that will carry on. Centralized data, which is also connected to the previous point, breaking down department boundaries and bringing central data, because we know one of the challenges that Martin also touched upon earlier is data is so disparate between departments. It has to be centralized. It has to come into a big data kind of central database, and imagine the efficiency and productivity that would come out of that. Disruption recovery would be much better, because this is an extended disruption phase where airlines can actually work on their disruption recovery tool usages. It could be more based on the centralized data that we were talking about, and also based on learnings from the machine. How has previous disruptions been managed from people, processes, as well as what the machine has learned. Definitely efficiency monitoring and cost monitoring is going to go up, and they are going to be parameters in your planning and tracking processes. And Gayle, thank you again for bringing that up, because we also see more self-service processes going to come up across the aviation landscape. More integration, more communications, and resource and capacity sharing is especially relevant for African market. So I'm hoping that just like any other market, it would help the African market as well. And e-skilling, thanks to Japan Airlines comment mentioned earlier, e-skilling is also something we see carrying on in most parts of crew training. The IT processes and strategy side, SaaS and cloud definitely seems to be catching on at this phase. Airlines we see are looking at their IT infrastructure, doing a consolidation. They seem to be preferring more end-to-end systems and modular systems, so they can agilely face in a lot of IT projects, which the modularity helps with. But end-to-end systems so that number of vendors in their landscapes are lesser. It reduces the headaches of managing different vendors, and also, most importantly, dynamicity. It's easier to have end-to-end systems connecting and giving you a central data. Legacy system moves would be higher. Modern technologies, especially triggered by remote operations that might be coming up, scalability and all the non-functional requirements, priorities would be going up. Security and privacy definitely would be improving. Simplified integration standards. And we are also seeing some trends where the large cloud providers like the Amazons are working along with IT providers in a partnership with airlines, giving big data facilities on the cloud. So centralized interdepartment big data on the cloud, tapping that power more is what's recommended and what would be transformed during this stage. We are already seeing that in some airlines in Europe and Americas especially. Network enhancements for remote operations.
I think for me, who's been involved in airline operations for quite a long while, the IT landscape changes is probably one of the greatest things that over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. It wasn't that long ago you'd speak to a big airline, they'd had their own data center, they had a lot of disparate systems all running in their own data center. The idea of them putting operational information or crewing information into a public-private cloud was just not even a starter. Whereas now I think pretty much all of the customers, large customers that we're implementing our systems on, are very open and essentially are pushing to have this on, whether it's on AWS, on Azure. That's definitely the trend. The single platform on a easily accessible cloud, as opposed to own data centers with lots of disparate applications with poor integration. Probably more than changes in business processes, I would say it's IT changes that seems to be the stronger trend recently.
I can just underline what Philip said. I mean, we also see this in cargo. It's the same, actually. And also from the requirements, it's more and more common that they are saying we even want clouds because it enhances the accessibility, mobility, and all of these kinds of things. And it makes more flexible also when building data lakes, actually, and use that data to improve efficiencies or processes in your operation.
Yeah.
What do others think? Is that more into the IT strategies and landscape that your transformations would be?
Sorry, Sapna, I didn't quite get to that. You're still scratching. There's quite a lot of noise with your microphone.
Yeah, sorry. Daniel did warn me about that, but I've tried to fix it, but yeah, it's still not fixed.
No problem.
Yeah, something I'll work on.
Don't worry. So what was the question?
I was trying to understand from others as well, because these are two main areas we're seeing transformation to carry on into the future. Was looking at hearing from others as well what their views are. But happy to hear it anytime. We are also looking at the project implementation side, sustained efficiencies like agile project wins. So the lower hanging fruit strategies coming up in the project implementation side. A lot of our customers are re-looking at how projects are being implemented. Is there a lot of wastages in processes? Like, is there too much documentation? Could that be instead met by just looking at how the IT systems are going to add benefit? So more touch and feel rather than reading pages and pages of documents. So that trend is going up, which is pulling down the project life cycles to less than 6 months, even for complex applications like a crew management system. Again, touching upon the point that remote implementation and remote pipelines of project implementation are really catching on these days. And evaluations of IT vendors are now becoming more value-based and cost-based. There is a need for proving the value of how this IT project is going to add more value to the airline's SLAs.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And from an IBS software perspective, just a couple of months ago, we implemented a brand new airline operations platform 100% remotely, which a few months ago we wouldn't even have considered doing, but it was totally possible. And we've now rolled that whole new process out onto others as well. So the idea of having remote implementation of mission critical systems is maybe part of the new normal.
Digafe, what do you think about that? I know you're involved in a lot of project management practices. Do you see these trends coming in at Ethiopian?
Yeah, actually, we are running different projects, especially as you said before. We are running, as you know now, Ethiopian Airport is part of Ethiopian Airlines, so we are running different projects for Ethiopian Airports, especially with the touchless related activities and self-bag drop activities. So yeah, we are running remotely the projects. Somehow I don't think after post-COVID also maybe the situation may continue as is, because as you know, it's cost effective. Even we did some UAT remotely. So now I think we are okay with that. We can't see any difficulties with this.
Thank you. And considering we have just 2 or 3 minutes left, just wanted to touch on recommendations on people practices side, which is cross-functional agile task forces being built. Higher productivity and decision evaluations would be suggested or are suggested, and remote workflows is a good way to go forward with, as long as they're supported by the essential infrastructure and data to support their decisions. What do you think is the key change? We know we have talked, everyone's contributed, but is there any other key change that you see starting today during COVID and filtering through into the future for sustained efficiency? Is it one amongst this, or do you see anything else that's not identified here that's going on into the future from now?
Can we also emphasize something? And this is a bit the reason why I am attending this call, having worked in cargo now for nearly 18 years or nearly 20 years. When you work for a cargo department, tail assignment or equipment change is something you really get to know actually at the end of the line. So you are the last to be informed about this by a message. And if you look at the importance of cargo, it's having now and will have in the future actually for airlines, I would like to emphasize that also in deciding what kind of equipment being used, not only on the passenger load or the passenger demand, is also what should be looked at. And that's why I think modern cargo systems should communicate this also to a modern operational system, is what kind of cargo do I have on board, especially in Africa, you know, where it's very hot, and if you fly pharma shipments, and to keep a shipment due to an equipment change on a turmoil, which is pharma related, in that heat can become a problem. So I think considering tail changes or the information that something like this or disruption is taking place needs to be driven far more early actually into the cargo system, so the cargo department can basically work on that with you to quality, with you to schedule, rebooking, etc., and planning, etc. So that's one thing I would like to emphasize actually, that in the future systems like an operational system should talk to a cargo system, so these departments can more actively or effectively work together.
Thanks, Christian. I think that's a very good comment also when it comes to disruption management, for example, because if you have to decide to divert to an alternate airport, it's crucial which airport can maybe manage a dangerous good, or which has also a live animal support. And if you have this very precious cargo shipments on your board, it's also important in the case of a disruption. So thank you for your comment. That's hopefully soon the reality, because technology is there and the integration is a no-brainer if you have the right IT partner. So we're at the end of the session, Sapna.
Yeah.
You have no secrets anymore. Wow, it's amazing.
Amazing.
It's really amazing. I thank you for this very great presentation and also all the lively comments. And we are not at the end of the Virtual Ops 2020 season. We still have some sessions to go. So tomorrow is the new Not Normal presentation with another guest speaker. And also next week we have 2 sessions, one with a guest speaker and our third aviation women panel. And we are already coordinating also in the week after a session about, for example, fatigue risk management. And you are all welcome to register for these upcoming Virtual Ops 2020 sessions. As soon as the recording is available, we will also publish it, so you have the opportunity to go through. And please do not hesitate to contact us if you have any further recommendation or question, and it would be always our pleasure to re-meet you in a dedicated session, for example, with your airline. So thank you very much again to everybody, and very important for me and the entire IBS staff, please stay healthy and safe, and looking for a new, not normal, bright future for all of us. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.